What up, rap leaders? Welcome back to my channel. Today we are exploring Kitty again. We're going to look at the cross streets in Kitty, starting with David Street at the intersection with Sheriff Street. But of course, this section of David Street is in the division of Subryanville. So we were actually in Subryanville, but when we get to Lamaha Street, we will be entering Kitty. So here we are at the intersection of Sheriff Street, this traffic circle brings together Sheriff Street. There's a train line road which continues on this side. That's a train line road continuing and intersecting with Sheriff Street. Sheriff Street continuing north and south. And this is David Street. David Street in Subryanville. So we're starting in Subryanville. What we're looking for is the changes, the developments in David Street, Kitty, since the last time you've been here. So the point about this video is that eventually what you get to do is to record the current state of the city, right? We're just making a record, a visual record of what the city looks like now, so that you can compare it after it has been developed, after the new buildings, new infrastructure has been put in. So this is a new development going out here. They're building the foundation for something big, right, on David Street in Subryanville. Now in the distance, so this looks like it might be a building, right? There's a building that is going up in this location. You can see the foundation being laid. They're going to pour concrete and so on. They don't seem to be putting any piles, driving piles into the ground. So eventually this building is probably not going to be more than 4 stories tall, because to be able to build above 4 stories tall, usually you have to put holes into the ground. In the distance there is a cemetery. So there's an old cemetery there. I suppose that's permanent. It's not going to be moved, and it's usually associated with the church. So this is what's happening on David Street. We'll come back and take a look at what they're building here in future, so that you can tell how this neighborhood is changing. This is David Street in Subryanville, and we're heading towards Kitty. The boundaries of Kitty are Lamaha Street on the east and Placentia Road on the west, the seawall to the north, and Lamaha Street to the south. And part of the way, part of the east side is bounded by the train line, right, the new train line road. This is Subryanville. This is David Street in Subryanville. Traffic coming off the east coast is using David Street to get into the city. And that is why now there's no sidewalk on this part of David Street. So it's kind of difficult to navigate. This is David Street in Subryanville. This vast investment, office space for rent. They're building something, I guess, big on the upper side, the top of that building. Avinash, Panther Security Services. This is Church Road in Subryanville. We've done a few videos in Subryanville. We haven't fully covered all of Subryanville, so we'll probably have to come back and capture a few of the cross streets that we missed. But this is David Street in Subryanville. This is the south boundary of Subryanville, because on the other side of David Street, that is where we can see this church and the cemetery, That's Campbellville. So David Street forms the boundary between Subryanville and Campbellville at this point, and then eventually it goes straight through Kitty. So this is what it looks like on a Monday morning. Right, the traffic is busy because we're approaching rush hour. This is St. James the Less Anglican Church, and the cemetery next door to it, of course, is the church cemetery. I guess there's also a school in that building, St. James the Less. Next door to it, there's a 3-story building, which is probably also a commercial building, commercial and residential building. There is Trex International, another commercial building, commercial residential building. On this side there's a Caribbean Endocrinology Institute here in David Street in Subryanville. So that's the Caribbean Endocrinology Institute, which is in fact a residential and commercial building. So somebody's set up practice at their home. But this is David Street. On the other side, we're looking south. That's Campbellville, right? So buildings on the south side of this street, if you're looking at right now, that's Campbellville. But on the north side, well, this side is Subryanville. David Street forming the boundary between Subryanville and Campbellville in this section until we get to Kitty. Till we get to Lamaha Street when it becomes Kitty. So this is David Street in Subryanville and Campbellville. Right on the south side, that's Campbellville. And on the north side, it's Subryanville. And here's Lamaha Street. So this is Lamaha Street. And now we're entering Kitty. So this is Lamaha Street. Right, we've actually looked at Lamaha Street in a few previous videos. And now we're entering Kitty. This is David Street in Kitty. On both sides of the street is David Street Kitty. And that side, we just passed through Campbellville and Subryanville. So this is David Street in Kitty. A lot of people have responded to these videos on Kitty in particular, because Kitty is one of the oldest neighborhoods in Georgetown. And as you can see from its location on the map, its boundary, the north boundary, is the Atlantic Ocean. So it's one of the northernmost divisions of Georgetown. This is David Street in Kitty. And they're basically one of the places that ordinary citizens, people who are not connected to the colonial government back in the days when Guyana was a colony of Britain, people could live here. Ordinary people could live here, could get land, could get property, and could live in Kitty. And that's exactly what happened. That's exactly what happened in Kitty. The people who lived here eventually and initially became the core residents, the core middle class of Guyana, of Georgetown. And this is what the city has been and looks like for decades now, 53 years since independence. But it's changing. Alright, this is David Street in Kitty. It's changing because of oil and gas and because of the influx of capital. This part of the city street is wider than the part where we just left. And so why we're doing this is so that For those of you who've lived in Kitty in the past, you can compare what is happening now and what exists now with what existed before. Alright, this is David Street in Kitty in 2023, and there are people who've lived here since the 1950s and the 1960s and the 1970s, and those people will be able to tell me what is different now, and in future we'll be able to see how it changes, because there's rapid growth and development in Guyana because of the oil and gas industry. And this location right in Kitty, David Street in particular, is prime real estate because of its location. Right, this is David Street in Kitty. Because of its prime location in the city, people are going to come up here and buy up this property, some of the residential neighborhoods. So for example, that vacant lot, I'm sure somebody's already developing new buildings and new businesses to erect there. This is the F.E. Pollard Primary School. F.E. Pollard, of course, the name quite famous in Guyana in education circles. And on this side is ACS Auto Spares and Mining Supplies. So there's a mixture of commercial and residential real estate already here in David Street. Kitty, that's the F.E. Pollard Primary School, and it's rush hour. It's about 7:30 in the morning, so kids are already on their way to school. It is Tally Safety, another hardware store. So a lot of these hardware stores have been opened recently to cater to the mining sector and the oil and gas industry, right, because of the demand for personal protection equipment, PPE. There are a lot of stores, a lot of shops that have opened to cater to this industry, oil and gas industry. This is Alexander Street in Kitty. We've actually looked at this before. We said Alexander Street is what this street is called, looking south. At the top of the other end, as you can see, that is the Kitty Market, and north of this intersection it's called Queen Street. So that's Queen Street looking north, and we've seen both in previous videos. Let's continue our walk on David Street. Alright, David Street in Kitty. It's just been raining, not a lot, but of course a little bit of rain is enough to cause flooding in Georgetown, and I'm going to show you the extent of that flooding in the middle of this rainy season coming up. I'll show you what it looks like when there's a significant amount of rain. You must have seen some of those in images in previous videos, how all the main streets in Georgetown get flooded when it rains. I'm going to make a video just highlighting exactly the extent of flooding and the drainage problem in Georgetown in a future video. But we're still in David Street in Kitty. This is David Street going through Kitty. We just crossed over Alexander Street, and we're heading towards Blissingen Road, which is the western end of Kitty. Now, that's a new building, but on the other side there are residential buildings in Kitty, David Street, Kitty. Here's a little church next door to a residential building that has been expanded. This one is called Megavolt. It's a residential commercial building. And these are the original and modified residences. But here is another commercial building, CTS CTS Watchtower. This is CTS Watchtower. I don't know what that building is. It seems commercial to me. Don't know what business they do over there. But this is David Street, Kitty. This is what is here now, guys. So if you lived here before, tell me if you recognize any of these structures from the time you lived here. This is another church, Church of the Holy Rosary, Catholic Church here in David Street, Kitty. Some of you might have been members of this church at some point in the past. Here is a new construction going up. This is another lot that is going to eventually have some kind of a new structure. All right, take a look at that. Another empty lot. You know, of course, they're preparing to build in this section of the city. So that's it, guys. This is what's happening in Kitty. We're looking at some of the cross streets now. This is David Street. We're going to go all the way to Shell Road, Kitty, Bar Street, Kitty, and so on in future videos. There's another tall structure going up David Street near to Lucinton Road, which is the next intersection. This one looks like it might be commercial and residential, or in fact it might be residential building, condominiums perhaps. This one is a hotel, I believe. Hotel and residential building. And this is Lucinton Road. That's some of the old architecture. The many windows from the 1960s. That's traffic coming into Georgetown from the east coast. And this is Lucinton Road and the end of Kitty. Across, that's the military base in Georgetown, and Camp Guyana military base. We saw there's a military base at Timeri, Camp Stevenson's. This is Camp Guyana, and over here, that's Kitty. David Street, Kitty, looking south along Lucinton Road. This is Sunset View, Sunset View Hotel, and over here, this is Matthi's Chicken King. This is Kitty. If you want to see more content like this, click like and subscribe, guys. This is what David Street, Kitty looks like in 2023. So those of you who have lived here before in the past can compare what it looks like now to what it looked like then. Tell me what has changed, and let's look into the future and see how it changes, how it develops as the country enters the era of oil and gas. That's a seawall, Kitty seawall. At the top of Lucinton Road there's a traffic circle, which you should be familiar with by now. But that's it, guys. That's what's happening here. If you want to see more content, like, click like and subscribe. In the comments below, tell me what you think about David Street, Kitty, and which other neighborhoods you'd like to explore as we examine how the city is changing in the era of oil and gas. Share the video with friends and family around the world. Let people know what's happening here in Georgetown, Guyana. Later!